calculator out. Take the amount of time that you've been alive and then divide it up by minutes, like so you can determine how many minutes of your life you've been alive. And then do the same for the amount of minutes you've maybe spent with someone. Or even if you don't want to divide it by minutes, just take the time that you can and then find the difference. Like put it into a fraction, and you'll find that, like, I've known you, Nicole, for what we're going on a year, maybe a year and a half now.
Mm.
A year and a half out of 42 years. It's a marginal percentage. When you really think about it, we barely know each other. So
Yeah.
to be in a relationship with someone in any capacity for a year and a half, and to just think what you believe is respect or common decency or love, it's just
Mm.
not someone's version of it. They were shown much different examples, unless you grew up in the same house. And that's just another conversation that's just not for
Yeah.
me to have.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be having. But when you think about the amount of time you've known someone, you barely know people and you're setting expectations that are yours.
Mm.
And that's where, when we talk about not knowing people's triggers, and what their buttons are, those triggers and those buttons come from your expectations.
Okay, so we are live. Hi to everyone watching today. I'm Nicole, the Fearless Women's Holistic Health Coach. And today we have Zach Chandler, a relationship coach, a certified relationship coach, like we all are. And he's here today to share all of the importance behind relationships. And we're going to bring up Fearless. And yeah, I'm super excited to have him today. He's also writing his own book. So yeah, I think this guy is super intelligence. He's my dear friend, and I'm super excited to host this interview with you today, Zach. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for the intro, and I'm so happy to see your face. It's been a long time coming. But yeah, I'm really excited to dive into what you do with Fearless Women, and speak to that.
Yeah, like we're so excited to have you here today because, as always, Fearless Women, we have mostly female guests here on the show, but we're super excited to have someone like you who have like a very specific niche on relationships, because we all know that relationships is a big part of life, and having supportive, healthy relationships in your life can really set you up for success. So us in Fearless Women, what we do is that we want to help like create like fearless, strong women all over the world and help and support them in every way possible. And relationships is one of those ways. So I would love to hear, like, with your coaching, what do you do, Zach?
Yeah, so my coaching is really simple. I initially began my working with people journey, if you will, about 20 years ago. I started working with at-risk youth in a residential setting in New York. And then I moved to California, did similar work there, and then I began working with foster youth, former foster youth rather, that were pursuing their post-secondary education. And what I noticed was, especially in the lives of young people who don't have good support systems, strong men, strong women, strong parents, siblings, mentors, that when they transition out of any type of care that they have, that they were really lost, and they didn't have sort of this guiding sounding board throughout their life to help support them to chase their dreams or even have them. And I found myself really finding an interest to helping people to cultivate strong relationships, because it seemed as though, as I had worked with people ages as early as about 5 all the way till about 18, and then working with adults in college, I learned that the number one thing that would derail a young college student from their collegiate journey was a detriment to their livelihood with respect to relationships. So I broke up with my boyfriend and now I've lost all hope. Or no one's coming to graduation with me, and I might as well just give up and not finish my senior year. And all this ties into cultivating strong relationships. I helped to build a mentor program with this organization so that you, Nicole, the graduate, would then have your, Amanda, all the way through the rest of your life, was really the idea. Because it wasn't that, your mentor was, per se someone, in your career or field, but you just have someone to spend time with, bounce ideas off of. And, once that job sort of came to a close for me, I found myself really desiring, wanting to get really immersed in relationships. And it was a common thread in my employment, but not necessarily my role. So then I took a huge leap and I got a job as a matchmaker for a prestigious agency in Omaha, Nebraska. And I learned that matchmaking wasn't necessarily my thing, but coaching was. I loved helping people to figure out, what are the barriers in my life that are keeping me from finding happiness. Sorry, the lights here. From finding happiness. And a lot of the times it was, the things that we encounter in life. Like, I don't like my job. I don't like, where I live, and all these things that seem to be in the way of finding love and finding a healthy relationship. And then after that, what do you do? How do you sustain a relationship? So I jumped into coaching. I pursued my coaching certification, just like you, with the Shetty certification school, and then really just wanted to focus on cultivating relationships. But all while this had happened, I had a pretty tragic loss in losing my father. And what stemmed from that was a mosh posh of challenges within my own family unit, not my immediate family, but my extended family, and learning that those relationships are challenging too, because those are relationships that, for the most part, people find themselves stuck in. And not because you don't want to have relationships with your siblings, your mother, your father, and what have you, but these are lifelong relationships that are there not by choice always, and by blood, or being relative to someone else. So I really wanted to help people navigate those relationships, where maybe they've spent a lifetime of not finding their voice, to finally decide it's time to speak up, because it's I guess I'll use a more appropriate terminology. It's hard to get the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak. And I think that when you find yourself in a really long relationship with someone, whether it's a friendship, a marriage, an employer, or yeah, like family, it can sometimes really be hard to speak up and set limits or boundaries, which is why I absolutely love what you guys do, because I have two girls of my own, and I'm trying to raise them in a world where they aren't afraid to speak up and say how they feel, if they're ever feeling like they're not heard in a relationship.
Yeah. Wow, that is amazing. And like you highlight too, like
Right.
relationships are such a big part of life. You always have someone around you. It's very rare that you live your whole life alone, without friends or family or anything like around you. So like making sure that you know how to navigate the relationships in your life to make them the best they can be. Because like you say, we don't choose your like immediate family, but the like second family is something that we usually choose through a partner or something like that. And making sure that even if it's like maybe not the best match in the beginning, or you need to work on stuff, that you actually have the tools and the capacity to work on your relationships because you want to make them work. um yeah, I just like you just like helped me like reflect on that too, on how like my relationships with family, all of that have been, it's like a work in progress your whole life. It's never something that you just like you never find like a perfect relationship. You always have to like give in like time and effort and like really want to make it work, to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would love to continue like on the relationship phase, but I also have some questions that I am curious about, like your background too. Is that okay, or do you want
Yeah,
to like, did you want to say something?
absolutely. Wherever you want to go.
So I want to go more into like the fearless subject first. So I'm not going to ask you if you're a fearless woman because I already know the answer to that. But I know that you're definitely a fearless man, and I know that you have a history that is, um, like that is something that has inspired me a lot. And I would love to hear from you. Like, in what phase of your life do you feel like you had to be fearless to get through something, or you have to be fearless to that was like the only choice for you? I would love to hear that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and no, I'm not a fearless woman, but I am. I'm learning how to be fearless in aspects of my life now, and a lot of that is attributing to fatherhood and learning that. So I was raised in a home with three other siblings. I don't have sisters, so when I had my first daughter, who's 7 now, I kind of panicked. I was like, "Where's my frame of reference? I don't know how to do this. I don't know girl life and how to be a girl dad at all." And I didn't really know what to do, but I know um, that there will be challenges that I know nothing about.
Yeah.
And I know that the two things I've really focused on for the last really 4 years of my life have been aligning myself with not doing things out of for two pretty important reasons and or causes. And I've learned that if I can start to separate the things in my life that I do out of uh, fear of guilt or obligation, I start doing things much more intentionally. And it's something that I talk with my wife about, my children about. Something that I talk. Well, my littlest one doesn't understand. She's almost 2 years, but we talk about a lot, and it's things that I think I now realize that most of the things that I have done in relationships for those two reasons have led me into a place in a relationship where I'm not really authentically being myself, and I don't mean, don't do anything you don't want to do, because there's a share of things that I don't always want to do. I don't always want to go to kid birthday parties. I don't always want to do the things that my wife does. And there's compromise built into relationships, right? But I think that when it comes to setting limits and boundaries, I think that I'm not authentically like loving myself when everything I'm doing seems like, if I have a confrontation with someone, let's appease the situation by doing whatever it is they need just to keep the peace, or doing things because I feel like I'm supposed to, and only because I'm supposed to. One of my friends told me, he asked me, he said, "I want you to think of anything you've ever done in your life that doesn't feel good to do, from holding doors open for people to just giving kindness to people." And it was almost near impossible, and I still to this day have no answer for that, because it's just the way we're wired. It feels good to give, it feels good to do for other people. um,
Yeah.
but I think that if you can think in that mindset of, I'm just doing this because it feels good to love my friend Nicole, you know um, even if it's something I don't really want to do this, there's a much bigger difference when it comes to setting limits and boundaries. And I know that, I mean, my 7-year-old is absolutely fearless, almost to a flaw, um,
I've
or to a
seen that.
fault rather. She is tenacious and speaks her mind. And what we have really raised her to believe is how you say things and what comes out of your mouth is far more valuable when you say it with confidence and intention and with kindness. And I've watched her go from, I hear what you're saying, say it in a way that makes sense for you and that makes sense, um, and like honoring your belief system. Because if not, what we say is just noise to other people. And for some people, it will be. But I've also learned that um, when I start just simply honoring what other people want, I'm so sorry about this light here, like a motion
It's
sensor.
okay.
It'll be fun, a little strobe light for everybody here.
Exactly, and we're all human.
I'm having to like snap my finger. So if you hear snapping, it's just me kind of making sure the light's down.
Yeah.
Um, but it is something that I think that as you start to think about the things that you have to say, you stop living behind this idea that, this is really going to upset Nicole if I say this. You ask yourself questions, is this kind? Is this truthful? Is it honest? Is it a reflection of my belief system? And can I hand that to you in a way that is necessary? Because what happens sometimes is in relationships, you decide to not say the thing that you need to say, and
Mm.
it hurts you far worse by harboring resentment and holding on to feelings only because I anticipate a reaction. So if I know that Nicole's going to flip out when I tell her that I just don't like her smoothie bowls, um, you know, it's not really helping her, and it's not it may not be a problem. She might say, "Oh, yeah, it's just maybe it's just not the one that I make that you like because I know you make so many amazing ones." But and that's a simpler example. But I think just the idea of think of the disservice it does to your relationship to not be honest. And I think that you know I want to say that it doesn't mean my wife says you know how do I look in this outfit that I'm going to tell her she looks terrible. Like the what is it like the typical question that like do I look fat in this outfit? And I don't want to I'm not encouraging we be truthful to a T in that sense of hurting people's feelings. What I'm just speaking to is just when it comes to limit setting and boundaries and honoring yourself in a relationship because it's hard to dig yourself out of that mess.
Mm.
I'm here.
I love this. This is so good. This is the next interview would definitely be with your lamp. I think it has a personality.
Yeah.
No, but thank you for sharing that. And it is so cool to hear like your story as well, because everyone's like view of relationships and what is like a good relationship, a functioning relationship is so different. And yeah, I just loved hearing like you sharing your story too, because it also gives me like perspectives that I don't think about. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And to like follow up on that, I would love also to hear about, you mentioned like your daughters, like is or at
Hmm.
least the one that can like that are like 7 years old, that she is like that you would consider her very fearless and like
Oh yeah.
yeah, and like she's amazing from what I've seen. So what do you think has helped her become that in your relationship with her?
I think I think it's just a lot of reinforcement and encouragement, and sort of kind of pushing her to like the limits of her comfort zone, and whether it's making new friends and talking to new people, saying hello. When we go to kid birthday parties, which I actually do enjoy because it's free cake and goodies for me. But it is thanking parents. Thank you for also having me, not just her friend. So she's not afraid of adults and people who she
Mm,
might feel inferior to. But I think a lot of it too is just she just was born this way. She's just been outspoken and um, always wanted to express herself. And I think that something that I learned from my childhood, which I'm sure we'll talk about, was just that my voice mattered, but not when it came to I have a concern, I have something that I'm not okay with. I would like to address how I feel about this. It was very much, I'm the parent, you're the child. That's just the way it is. And I have to realize, and not every parent, excuse me, not every parent agrees with this, but like, it's my child's house too. She doesn't pay the bills. She didn't ask to be here. So it is her home, and she has a say in a lot of the things that happen. And I don't mean in a way where she's choosing what's on the grocery list and she's choosing what day she wants to go to school, but she dresses herself. She's done that from an early age, and I just believe that when she wants to make her own decisions, that within the confines of safety and age appropriateness, I'm letting her make decisions that are best for her. And when she doesn't want to do things, I'm not the parent that's, pushing her to go on the roller coaster she doesn't want to go on, or
mm,
to spend time with a friend she doesn't want to. I mean, we'll push to like the limit of like, well, it can be good to make new friends, but then when she ultimately says no, it is realizing that like I want her to understand as a young woman in society that no is a complete sentence. And that's
mm,
really it. And I think really, I mean, this is very, it's not self-serving, but this is kind of the two goals I have in life as a parent is that I hope that one day when she's in a really tough situation in her life and feels like she doesn't know what to do or who to turn to, that I'm a phone call. Whether I'm the first, second, or 10th phone call, I don't want to be afraid to speak up and say how she feels. I also want her to live in a world where she can feel comfortable, as I haven't, to hi, where she feels comfortable. Yeah, it's like auto lights in here. I'm so sorry.
That's
Where
okay.
she doesn't feel uncomfortable to say like, Dad, you really messed up. Like, and this is
Mm,
how. I think I have lived for that conversation of not raking my own parents over the coals, but to be able to say, now that I've come to a place where I finally found like a way to string my life together and make sense of the experiences I've had and how it's impacted me, I'd like to share that with you. So that way,
mm,
it's a little bit of what at least I called it, or we called in the field of working with young people, pre-teaching. It's like, Nicole, if you touch the stove, you're going to burn yourself. And that way, when you touch the stove, it's kind of like, well, you know,
mm,
I don't have to talk about it. So I think sometimes telling people, hey, like these are my triggers. These are the things that make me feel really uncomfortable or sensitive or indifferent. And I think having the opportunity kind of after the fact to tell someone, hey, I haven't really realized it now, but I think now I'd like to take the opportunity to tell you so it can strengthen our relationship and maybe which boundaries I don't want crossed. And I was never given that opportunity. And I want my child to be able to tell me, I don't really like this. And I didn't feel okay when that happened. And just to have an opportunity for release and to just
mm.
sit there and be like, okay,
Yeah.
okay. And I let her feel heard. And those are the two things I wish for. And I can't do that if I'm going to create a space in our home where I don't care what you have to say.
Mm.
It just can't
Wow.
exist. You can't cultivate that way.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And it really sounds like you're creating this super empowered little lady that's gonna take over the world in a good way.
I
It's
mean, I have to.
yeah.
Because I mean, I worked with young girls, age 5 to 13,
Yeah.
who struggled to speak up to the abusers in their life, whether
Mm,
it was their family or unfortunately for some foster homes.
mm,
I spoke with young women who were in their 20s who were never believed when they would report incidents of whether sexual assault or sexual abuse or any other type of abuse they experienced, or even to their employer that they're feeling uncomfortable around, or I want to talk about a raise. Like
yeah.
these are things that I think there's a system in place that's designed to allow women to feel like that's okay.
Mm,
And I just wholeheartedly don't agree with that. And it's not that I subscribe to that ever. I just think I became more aware of this whole other side of the world I knew nothing about because the only woman in my
mm,
house was my mother. And
mm,
I watched her build her own business, be an entrepreneur and have thrive in her business. But I never really saw it from like the growth aspect of how does someone find your voice? It just was like, oh, she's just, an A
yeah.
type woman and that's what women are like, but it's just not the
Mm,
case. And that has to
yeah.
be built and cultivated. And we build young boys to be strong and run through walls and women to be, traditionally submissive in relationships. And I want my daughter to be in a position where if she's ever in a relationship and she needs to leave, that it's just there's nothing that's like, oh, but the children, or oh, but the money, or oh, but we have a house, or all these things we share, and and she can just be like, hey, I'm coming home,
Mm,
come on in, you know. And I need to cultivate that opportunity so she can not feel. I want her to not ever. I would love her to want someone, a partner in her life, man, woman, or otherwise, and I want
mm,
her to not feel like she needs someone.
yeah. Yeah, that is like really great because I think that's important that people realize that we are complete by ourselves and a partner is only gonna like be as like a sparkle on the top, like a plus thing that is super great. But you will, even if you will leave that partner, you're still whole. You're not like you don't lose a part of yourself. You're still you, but you lose like something that like was like yeah, a part of your life, but not a part of you. I think that's what
Oh
I've
yeah, I mean,
seen. Yeah.
I want her relationship to be a part of her pie chart. I want to be a part of her pie chart. I want her to be the whole pie, and everything
Mm,
else is an aspect of that pie for her. And
mm,
I think that we as grown-ups and parents who are listening, we can cultivate dependency by doing that. I want my child to find ways to not need me. I think
mm,
that's the goal, is independence. And I think, that starts I was actually talking with another fellow coach about sleep training, how I was sleep training
mm,
um, my infant, and talking about how even the process of sleep training and building self self-sustenance and learning how to soothe yourself starts at such an
mm,
early age, to where my youngest learned to play by herself, keep herself busy. And I think all of that starts at a very, very early age. And it'll be different for our two kids, because she grew up for 5.5 years without a sibling.
mm,
But yeah, I think it's something that we have the responsibility to do as adults, to make sure that we raise women to be, just as capable and strong, regardless of gender. And I think that
yeah.
maybe I'm not raising my young girls to be fearless women. I'm just raising them to be fearless. I
Mm,
think that I completely subscribe to and sign off on, what fearless women does. But I think that for me, I just I can't see. I can recognize that gender can be a barrier, but I want my children to push through that and
mm,
and bulldoze that wall, because
yeah.
they're just fearless people. So they don't see, um, that I'm incapable for these reasons that I've taught, and hopefully society doesn't do that, and I have to be prepared for that. Just constant
Mm,
conversations, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm actually really curious about like since you're a relationship coach, what what part of your background led you to become a relationship coach today? I know you mentioned it a little bit, but if you want to share, I would love to hear.
Yeah, I feel like the best answer I can give you is first of all, it's none. And I feel like any person that watches this, that knows me well enough, especially that I have a few people that will probably watch this, that will be like, I hope you're getting to this, Zach, because you know that this is the answer. Um, those who have known me for 20 years, those who have known me through high school, college, it's just dating all the wrong people and making relationship mistakes, and just learning who I was supposed to be and who I was becoming in relationships. And I think that one of the things I learned, and at least the process of writing this book, is that and I think a lot of people do this in their relationships, is they cultivate what they believe is their love language based on the things they didn't have, the inadequacies of the relationships they had with their parents, which then dives into attachment theory and all of that. But I think that I recognize that I dated a lot of people that felt to me like, remnants of mostly my mother, but also my father.
Mm,
And I think that there was an element of unattainableness, and that kind of came through as like emotionally unavailable. And so I would
mm,
date people that kind of kept me a little bit close, like for sake of love bombing, but also at a distance for sake of, I don't know if it was power or control. And so I dated, like, and a lot of people, they'll say like, oh, I dated my mother my whole life, I dated my father my whole life. And I really
yeah.
paid a lot of attention to that, like throughout this process, and recognizing the similarities. um but I think that I didn't realize those are all a lot of mistakes throughout my life, until I met my wife and kind of reflected back to go, wow, a
Mm,
lot of my experience in relationships came from my experience in relationships. I think uh my understanding of like human beings and how we interact, I think has
yes.
come through a lot of the work that I've done with young people. But, I also just, I think they say that when you lose a sense, your other senses strengthen.
Yeah.
And I feel like although many would probably disagree in my home because I was very loud and outspoken and I said what I felt, but there's a lot of things I just wasn't allowed to say. And just because I
Mm,
spoke up doesn't always mean I was heard. And so
mm,
I think the element of feeling unseen and unheard a lot, even though I was seen probably more than my siblings, because I think I was kind of assigned a role that I kind of played into of being that kid in our house. I did leave feeling pretty unrecognizable and unseen as a person. I was seen for my behaviors, not for the why or who I was.
mm,
And I guess what I'm getting is that I think that I learned I learned that um, I was very in tune to relationships around me and why
mm,
people were acting the way that they were because I just of all the times that I was outspoken, there's also a lot of times I just sat silently as a fly on the wall and recognizing the ways things shifted around me. So I've been really observant um, as a young person, as an adult, and I think I had a lot of things to resolve within myself until I realized that the perfect partner for me was loving myself,
mm,
and that allowed me to love my wife. Until then, I was trying to mend things in one important relationship in my life, but doing it through other people.
mm.
So,
Wow. Wow, I relate to that so much. Thank you for bringing that up. Like, just the importance of like loving yourself first, because that automatically like lets you, like, for example, like triggers and stuff that you can have in relationships. They come from you usually. You like, if your partner says something that is like truly without any bad meaning at all, you can still be triggered by it because you have something in your background that makes you triggered by it because you haven't resolved it, or you haven't like like practiced more self-love and
mhm.
self-compassion and started loving yourself. And I recognize that a lot in my relationship, that things that are not supposed to be triggering can be triggering, and that it feels like it's that person's fault, but it's me who didn't do the work on myself first to be able to be in this relationship that is healthy. But the things that makes it not healthy is the things that I bring in, like the meaning I bring into what they say, like the way it hits me when it shouldn't hit me if I would have resolved that before. So yeah, I just like relate to what you're saying a lot. And
Yeah,
I would
and
love to hear, yeah.
I was just saying it's true. I mean, if you don't tell someone what your triggers are, a lot of times because you don't know them, you
Mm,
don't understand what they are. So, it might make you feel a type of way or respond a type of way. And if you're aware of them and you're not willing to tell your partner, I think you do incredible disservice to your relationship. And I don't
mm,
think it means wearing a sandwich board like, hey, here's my triggers. I actually have a
yeah,
really cool tool that I created for clients that really breaks down so you can understand like what are the things that trigger me? What do I do? What can I do
yeah,
differently? What would I like to do? What's keeping me from doing that? And then you can
mm,
recognize, I did it with one client and she was able to recognize, oh my gosh, like the thing that I do. It's not even just like now I know like what my triggers are, but I now know that every time I'm triggered, I have a response. And it is
yeah,
to shut down, internalize, and not speak. And then that leads to a whole stem of problems because, you know,
mm,
um, I think fight language is important too, letting someone know. Like my wife and I, we disagree a lot on um, how we respond after conflict. And it's because she's an internalizer and I'm like a
mm,
resolver. And I think because out of fear of the state of a relationship, I was like, oh my gosh, like things are going to fall apart. We got to fix it. And for her, she's like, I need time. And that never works. We always meet a point of conflict when we're, I want to work it out. She's like, I'm working it out in my head. And being able to have
mm,
those conversations of like, well, then where's the compromise there? You know,
yeah,
go take a walk and we sort of come to this, I need time, but when I'm ready, I will let you know. So that way I
mm,
know, okay, because I think that sort of meets both needs. But even figuring that out can be hard for couples because it just means,
yeah,
you know, unpeeling layers that maybe you don't even understand, or maybe you're reluctant to share because you don't accept like I'm the problem. And it's not that you're the problem. It's just like this is my problem in this relationship that I don't know how to fix. And we talk to our kid about it all the time, when
mm,
she's upset, these are not like they're your buttons, they're your triggers. These are
mm,
upsetting you. you got to figure out how to get around that and how to resolve it. And
Mm,
sometimes it just means talking about being fearless, speaking up. I don't like when you do that instead of
mm,
throwing a tantrum. Because we throw tantrums as adults. They just look different, you know?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's so true. I love what you say because I think that what you're saying also leads to the fact that like lots of communication, like being able to have conversations without just like, screaming at each other or just like getting upset, like trying to actually hear your partner or hear your friend, like hear what they're trying to say and not like just listen to respond, listen to like react or something. Actually, like learning
Yeah.
how to communicate properly has been such a huge like thing for me in my relationships. Really being honest too, like honest communication. Let's say.
Yeah, one of the greatest lessons I had in communicating with people came with this one kid that I used to work with back in New York, maybe like 2005, a long
Mm,
time ago, early into my career working with people. And there was a young gentleman, about 17 years old, who was, in crisis, and he was in his bedroom and blaring, I think it was Wu-Tang Clan from his room, and nobody wanted to hear it. We had a group of kids that weren't into, old rap
mm,
music, and they were like ready to take them out. It's like they had their
yeah,
pitchforks and flames and they were ready to barge in there. And we as a staff had to figure out how do we address this because
yeah,
we need to allow him to, release, and this is his release, is blaring music, and we have to allow the kids to, sleep peacefully. So what do we do?
mm,
So my boss was like, yeah, I'm gonna have you go in there. I was like, and do what? And he gave me
yeah,
this really important lesson. He said, I just want to tell you, he said, it's all about how you knock on the door. Okay. And I don't mean that physically. I mean, if you walk in there and tell him to shut it down, what do you think is going to happen? And I was
mm,
like, well, I don't really know him too well. He might run out, which I guess solves one problem, but creates another one. He might come out and fight me or the kids. He could turn the music louder. So he says, I want you to think really carefully about how you engage. And
mm,
it's all about how you knock on the door, but I don't want you to think about it physically. So I went in there and I started shouting with him. I was trying to have a conversation. We're yelling, having conversation. And then finally it was like, what is this song? And I remember the song. It was Gravel Pit by Wu-Tang Clan. And I was like, I think I know this song. And I was like, I knew some of the words. And so I was like, do you mind turning it down so like I can like just ask you? I don't know their whole album, and it looks like this is back in the day of CDs. So I was like, you got the whole album? So he turned it down. We started listening to it and talking music for like a good hour. And then as I left, it was like, hey, by the way, I know you really care about your speaker. You can blare it if you need to. You're probably going to blow your speakers. I was like, also, it's really hard to hear the music when it's at like 10. Hear it a little bit better when it's at 7. I also don't want your friends to come in here and smash your speaker when you're away at school or something like that. And we can do the best that we can, but I don't want you to lose friends over that. And your music's actually really good. I mean, there's a really fun conversation, and music kind of became our bonding point.
mm,
And I think about that a lot especially when there's such a disconnect, even though I have a great relationship with my child, this disconnect of she's 7, I'm 42, we have to struggle sometimes to like, what do we have in common? With like the toys she likes. I mean, I think she probably thinks I'm into all of her stuff, and that's just because I love her very much, that I love the things that she loves. But you always have to find a way to talk to people so they feel seen, heard, and respected. Otherwise, no one's going to listen to you.
mm,
If you yell and scream, and if I came in there guns blazing and just unplugged the speaker and took it out of his room, like these are all things that anyone else might have done. And
yeah,
I realize my voice is powerful, and what I say, in the same way I look at parenting. I mean, every day I wake up, it's a day I can totally screw my kid up if I just
mm,
say or do things the wrong way. And I just think that the way that you address someone is really important, because without addressing someone with kindness and understanding or a willingness to listen, as you said, just waiting to speak,
mm,
I think you're just trying to have your own needs met. And there were a lot of things that I didn't share there that like he was really going through. And
mm,
it was his way of telling people, I'm hurting. I'm really
mm,
hurting, and leave me alone, but also come to me because I want to be talked to.
yeah,
But he didn't have the communication skills to say that, and I
yeah,
think that, you know, uh, we need to constantly check in with the people in our lives. If, do you need to be heard, helped, hugged? I think those are three things I've heard a lot that I think are really important. And I've learned with my wife sometimes that the answer isn't always you just want to be heard. You don't need me to come up with a solution. You just want to be
Yeah.
listened to and validated or
Yeah.
understood.
Wow. You just gave me like crazy goosebumps. I loved hearing that story. It's just like I just felt like, oh my God, like I want to cry. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
man.
And yeah, it's crazy because I really, while we were talking, what I felt was that he's expressing himself. He is asking for help or for love in the most like unlovable ways, but that is his way of expressing that he needs to be maybe heard or held or hugged. Like I love that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just crazy because um we all show our feelings and stuff in different ways, and it's easy for us like human beings to be like, you think of your way as the right way, so when someone else like screams for help in another way, you don't really understand it and you don't really agree with it and you don't think it's right, but it's because like you have a different way and people have other way, like we're so different and unique.
We have
But
an agenda, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, for
I
sure.
I needed to keep peace. It was 11 o'clock. I needed the kids to go to bed.
Mm,
Um, and it needed to stop. And that was my agenda,
yeah.
and it was me recognizing that it's a circumstance that's dictating my
Mm,
response. If this is 3 in the afternoon, we would have taken the kids and been like, we're gonna go like shoot some hoops and come back. But the circumstance dictated my response because it was like, okay, like this is an elevated circumstance, and but you also have to realize that
mm,
this young person was electing to do this at 11 at night because it was like, I want to set someone off. At least that's how we perceived it. And if you work with young
mm,
people ever, it is always much bigger than the behavior. The behavior is just the tip of the iceberg.
yeah.
What was underneath that is that he had a pretty challenging conversation about the separation of his family that day and was losing hope. And
Mm,
so he just was saying, screw it. And that was his way of saying, well, if I have to alienate myself from everybody and subconsciously find who's willing to show up for me and
yeah.
who's willing to say, I don't care, we love you. And we're just going to be here through this whole process. Um, because what came from that was an unbelievably close relationship of knowing that in the face of my toughest day that I've been here, you just came right in and
Mm,
sat with me like in silence,
yeah.
you know, and just listen to music and didn't do what I thought, which was like,
Mm,
give me a reason to fight. And that's all that this kid knew. I mean, he knew the
mm,
coping skills that he knew. And I think that that's something I also have to realize. I mean, I came into my marriage with a set of tools, skills, and, coping mechanisms that perhaps my wife didn't. She has other ones that I really need to work on. Um, and expecting someone to respond as a mirror in the way that I need them to is just merely
mm,
meeting my agenda. It's just
mm,
meeting my needs for whatever I want out of the moment, taking absolutely no stake in like, what is it that you need? And that was the first question that was asked.
mm,
What is it that you need right now? And it was actually leave me alone. And I was like, okay. Um, and sometimes words are not enough to express what we really feel. We have
mm.
to take our time with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I believe that if you would have left him alone, that you wouldn't have had that like breakthrough at that point. So it's about
Yeah.
like also seeing what's behind the words, what like what what hurt what they're hurting from, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh
you
yeah.
for thank you for sharing. I also would love, I know we are running out of time, but I'm really curious, like what is the main struggles that you do notice in the coaching, like that people have
And just
in
like the,
relationships? Yeah, in your coaching, like in relationships, what is the like
yeah.
main like you start like noticing in the coaching that people are struggling with in their like relationships?
Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes it feels to me so elementary to say this, and it's not to disregard anyone because I can tell you that the most catastrophic shift in a relationship I experienced with my own parent after my dad passed
Mm,
in 2018. was for this exact reason. And it sounds really easy it's always easier to someone else who's not involved, but it's
Yeah.
just communicating your needs. I mean, and I think
Mm.
that's why I was so excited to do this with you, because it really is about communicating and expressing yourself and being able to
Mm.
speak up and build confidence in your own voice. And to say like, Nicole, what you said really offended and really hurt me. And I just don't appreciate you saying that in a group of friends, whatever,
Mm.
you know, and knowing that perhaps you might be defensive. Perhaps you see
Mm.
it differently. Perhaps you might end the friendship that we have. I don't know, but it
Mm.
doesn't change or shift that what I needed to say had to be said. It wasn't okay with me. And
Mm.
when, coming back to, the first thing we started talking about, just expressing yourself intentionally. And I think that through every conversation I've had with someone, there's some element of, I just haven't had the conversation. I haven't said the thing. And it
Mm.
might be like a lot of things that you're not saying, but it's just, I'm not communicating. I'm not like, yeah, I get sort of like, I guess I need to sit down and have that conversation is always like the first initial
Yeah.
like realization is things are just not going to get better because you want them to. Um, I have two quotes that I love, and I've heard them growing up, and I love to share them. They mean almost the same thing. One is a little bit complicated to recite, uh, and the other is just very, very simple. So take which one you
Mm.
like, but it's the idea that nothing changes if nothing changes, or
Mm.
if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got.
Mm.
And in relationships, if you're just going to hope, like, I hate the idea when people are like in relationships and they're like, they should just know. They should know better. Like, it doesn't take into account anyone's life experience, their triggers, what makes them happy, what doesn't.
Mm.
An exercise I love to have people do, and I started doing this when I worked with foster youth, when mentors would say like, oh, Nicole just doesn't ever call me, and like we just don't, I don't think he's really interested in having a relationship. And when we go to
Mm.
lunch, it's very brief conversation, and then like we kind of go our
Yeah.
separate ways. I don't know if we're feeling it. I tell people, take a calculator out, take the amount of time that you've been alive, and then divide it up by minutes, like so you can determine how many minutes of your life you've been alive, and then do the same for the amount of minutes you've maybe spent with someone. Or even if you don't want to divide it by minutes, just take the time that you can and then find the difference, like put it into a fraction. And you'll find that, like, I've known you, Nicole, for what, we're going on a year, maybe a year and a half now,
Mm.
a year and a half out of 42 years. That's a
Yeah.
marginal percentage. When you really think about it, we barely know each other. So
Yeah.
to be in a relationship with someone in any capacity for a year and a half, and to just think what you believe is respect or common decency or love, it's just
Mm.
not someone's version of it. They were shown much different examples, unless you grew up in the same house. And that's just another conversation that's just not for
Yeah.
me to have.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be having. But when you think about the amount of time you've known someone, you barely know people, and you're setting expectations that are yours.
Mm.
And that's where, when we talk about not knowing people's triggers, and what their buttons are, those triggers and those buttons come from your expectations.
Mm.
I was 3 minutes late to our call today because I had weather going on,
Mm.
and I would not know if you have a history with tardiness that is triggering for you. But to be ignorant of that and not to acknowledge it if you told me you're upset is unfair to you. It's a really unfair thing to then say, well, that's ridiculous. For me, it is, but for
Mm.
you, it's not. For you, it's very real. Um, yeah.
Mm. Well, I didn't mind you being late today, but no, but yeah, it's I'm learning a lot, like through hearing you speak right now, and I'm really gonna take things with me, and I hope that people that are watching also find the value of this because it's so, yeah, it's really valuable. So thank you again. I think I've said thank you like 100 times now, but thank you again for sharing
Well, it's
that.
hard. I mean, I think that one of the things I had to accept, even being a relationship coach, is that our
Mm.
relationship's not perfect. We have challenges and bumps, and we have to figure things out because we're figuring ourselves
Yeah.
out too. And I tell people, that I love my wife, but she's just not the person that I married. And I'm not the man that she married. We have changed and we have evolved. We are parents now. We're different people. We have different goals in life than we did when we came together. And we are, I mean, people say like, I want to find someone to grow old with. Well, that's what it's like. It's not, we're not 15, 16, 17 anymore and dating and are in our 20s and dating and, falling in love. Like it's work. It's work to say these things. It's work to say the hard thing. It's
Mm.
work to say, and I do believe there's a method. If your listeners have ever heard of the sandwich method, you use it a lot working with kids, and that is sandwiching the hard thing with two really, really fluffy, wonderful things. So, not just telling someone, it's really, really annoying that you were late. It's, hey, Zach, I know this is really important to you. It's also important to me. A little frustrated you were a little bit late, but I'm glad that you're here now. And just next time, you're really great. You could be here because I really enjoy our conversations. And I think that's a really delicate way of telling someone this is something that's important to me. But I
Mm.
don't need to make you feel terrible about it. You probably didn't know because again, they're your triggers and I don't
Yeah.
know them. Um, but I think that's kind of the work in not having relationships with people to fill the voids of what you've been maybe looking
Mm.
for to fill the gaps in your life, but to do the work on yourself. And too often I find people in relationships that are like, it's not about what they're bringing to the table. It's about what someone else is bringing to them. Instead of having the list of what I'm looking for in a partner, it's what am I going to bring when that person shows up? What are the things that I'm looking for? And let me go be them.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I bring value to this relationship and also making sure that I am being mindful of the fact that I'm meeting a whole new person in my life and that there's
Mm.
just natural compromise that you have to find in existing with another human. And the older
Yeah.
you get, the harder it gets to compromise your life.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. The more we like live with ourselves, we learn more about ourselves, and it's harder to compromise as well then, because you have
Yeah.
created this whole like bubble for you, and now someone is gonna like pop that bubble and come in with their own stuff, and you're like, whoa, what is happening? Like, I have my safe little bubble. But yeah, compromising is also like a key that I know in relationships, that you can't have everything your way. You have to find like a middle point there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. As like a final like question, okay, two final questions, if that's okay. Um, I would love to know, for anyone watching here today, do you have any like tips or something that you would like to share with someone if they are struggling right now with like managing a relationship with a friend or like partner or something like that? Any valuable tip that you could give that could help someone just like take the first step or like improve it or something like that?
I think that um, there's a lot of internal work you can do in terms of asking yourself, what are my triggers? What are the things that really frustrate me about my partner? And I think I'd start there with like, what are the things that like are challenges in your relationship? And then where do you like, whose responsibility do you feel like it is to resolve this?
Mm.
And most of the time what you'll learn, I mean, a lot of my coaching really focuses on three things. It's awareness, accountability, and action. I think that I want to lead people into taking those steps because all that we can really do is change ourselves. So if you can take stock in these are the things that I'm aware of, and then where am I taking accountability on the things that I can shift and change. And some of that, accountability or the next step would be action. Some of that is just saying, hey, this thing that you do really frustrates me. Um,
Mm.
but you may not get a response that's, okay, I won't do that. It might be, I'll work on that. Or it might be like, well, that's just not something that I'm capable of doing. And then it's now, how do I respond to that? How can I resolve that? But I think having those conversations about are the things that happen in this relationship unhealthy or are they triggering because I'm not healthy yet and I am not in a healthy place with some of the things that I haven't resolved yet. Um,
Mm.
and there are some things that people do in relationships that are extremely toxic and unhealthy. And I don't think that I feel comfortable saying, oh, they're all triggers. It's all ourself. But um, oftentimes we try to date, mirrors of what we believe that whether it's that, something we think is filling a void in our own life, or something that we feel like we deserve, that maybe something someone hasn't subscribed to yet or agreed to. And we kind of put this in this box of expectation of like, well, you should do this because it's what I want, when not really knowing if someone's willing, interested, or capable of that. And then I think making sure to have an equal balance of, what does my partner need? If you are willing to sit down and say, these are all the things that frustrate me, what are the things that I don't do well? And not making excuses for that. What is it that you need me to improve on? One of the things I really love to do. So for anyone watching, I would guarantee most of you have had a job at some point where you sat down with someone and they scored you on all of the things that you do, your ability to show up for work, the quality of work, the quantity of work, and gave you a score, gave you a raise. So my wife and I've done this. I think sometimes we miss it because we, kids and everything, but for our anniversary, we like to sit down and kind of do like a relationship review. How are we? It seems a bit like business partnery, that I think you call it whatever you want, but I think sitting down and just being like, hey, how are things going for you in this relationship? Like a check-in. It can be every year. It can be your financial goals, your life goals. It can be children. It could be just how you're treated, and to sit down and be honest. I like encouraging people to do this in a neutral space. So it's not in the house where now I'm pissed off and I'm walking out. It's do it in a nice restaurant, celebrate it, and talk about the things that you want to do to elevate your relationship, and where. And I also think it holds accountability. If I've said, this is really important to me, it's not happening. It becomes kind of a placeholder of like, look, we talked about this and it's really important to me. And you said something that made me feel like you were going to commit to try and work on this for me. I think can be really impactful and important for couples to have that opportunity to reference, the agreement to improve on things. And then in terms of jumping into a relationship, I know my wife and I didn't do this when we were dating, but we created what we call our 5 marriage principles. They're fluid, they can change if we need to, but we have 5 core values of things that we feel are really important to us, and everything has to kind of align with that. And it can be anything. It could be honesty, communication, trust, support, and then to define, what does that mean? And I think those are really important things to do in a relationship, but they can be awkward and uncomfortable and weird and silly, but I think it's just really important to show each other you care enough about this investment in your life to put the work in. It's not going to just go where you want it to go. It will end up in a different place than you started, 100%.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna actually take that tip. Me and my boyfriend are closing in on our like 1 year anniversary, and I would
There
love
you
to
go.
do that. Just like talk through, like, how do you think it's going? How do you feel about this? Are you happy? Like, are you satisfied? Is there anything we can improve? Like, I think those things are like super healthy and important to talk about, because maybe you go around and you believe that everything is fine, but that person is struggling, or that person is feeling something else that you are not feeling. So I would love to do that kind of check-in, and I think it's really important, like, as well, to like maintain your relationships that you have, if you don't want to lose them by maybe like missing something that is going on that you don't know about.
Yeah, and it's hard. I think it requires, I think where people get stuck is they say, oh yeah, like, and this is where it's sort of like forewarn couples. If you have someone that responds with, oh no, everything's fine, there's always the potential that you are the reason someone can't share the truth. If someone can't be honest and go, honestly, you're just messy, your laundry's everywhere, and I don't know, I don't know why, it bothers me. If someone can't express that,
Yeah.
there may be something in you that's keeping them from being able to do that. Maybe your reaction, maybe even in this moment, the idea that you're going to get really offended if I say this. But do you want to live in a relationship where you can't be honest and express yourself? Is it something that is truthful and it's frustrating or a trigger for you? And I think that builds practice, because if you can't say that, like, I don't know what your laundry habits are, Nicole, but if that is the thing that, let's say, your boyfriend doesn't like about you, then how is he going to say the really hard things in 10 years, or wherever things turn out. How is he going to say those things to you?
Yeah.
If every time he has a concern, you get defensive and you don't want to listen. I wouldn't want to bring that to you. I'll just start. I tell my wife all the time, for all the things that I've addressed, I have a list of things that I've elected to say, I think I can figure this one out, and I don't tell you about it. And that's good. I think there's a balance of, okay, I can clean the pot of oatmeal. I can clean it. I don't have to address this every time. I'll just do it. It doesn't need to be a problem in our relationship, you know? But yeah, I think again, it's just communication, having those conversations with your partner and being willing to, as much as you want your thing to be heard and not argued with, I think you have to be willing to do the same and present that. This is a space where we just listen and we acknowledge and we go, okay. And it's not a time for excuses or why I'm not doing it, or
This is invaluable, and thank you so much for your time today, Zach. It means so much for me, and probably for anyone else watching as well. And if anyone here is thinking now, okay, I really needed to hear this, and I would love to know more about Zach, or just get in contact with him, where could they find you?
So it's really easy to find me on social. If you look up Zach Chandler Coaching, I'm assuming you'll tag it, but it's ZachChandler, and the word coaching, on every social media platform, with exception to Twitter. It's too long for them. But you can find me on Instagram. It's probably the easiest way to find me. If you are interested, I know I touched on it a little bit, but in writing a book, I'm writing a book, and it's about my life, but about my life through relationships. Predominantly the ones that shifted after my father passed. But again, like I've sort of encouraged that we go back and kind of understand why these things happen. You start to see 40 years of not really speaking up, or even 18 while living in my home with my parents, not speaking up and saying how I felt, has led to me tolerating, accepting things that were just normal in this relationship. So I'm writing a book about it. It's called Banana Fish. And that is on Instagram at Banana Fish Book. But if you find either of those, reach out and get a hold of me. I'm here to answer questions, help be, of service to anyone who is stuck. My goal is to help people create the relationships of their dreams, and it doesn't have to be romantic. It's just, it took a long time to get unstuck in this relationship, and it doesn't always mean that it works. I think that's one thing I really harp on, is the relationship of your dreams is always with yourself. It doesn't always have to be attached to this end result of, I want to fix this thing with this person. It's fixing things within ourselves, and getting to the place that relationship will ultimately be because of that. So
yeah, I'm super excited about your book. I will be waiting. I will be knocking on the door at me. Please, I want to have a copy. So super excited about that. And I love the name too. It's not something I would expect, banana fish, but I guess it has its meaning too. And it's definitely something that gets stuck in your mind. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I'm happy to just give a little teaser, because I think I do talk about it in the book, and it will be all over the social. But the short story of it was just that I was kind of told to be quiet and stop talking a lot during conflicts in my home. So this pseudo word was created in therapy that became banana fish. But I didn't realize till I got older that this was a word that was weaponized against me. It was not like a mutual word to use. It just was a replacement. It was the same thing as saying, shut up. And I think until even in my 40s, when it was still referenced to me, I was like, this is just, it might as well be, a blank line. It just, and put any word you want in there. It still means the same thing. And it still was meant to quiet my voice and quell my spirit. And I don't think I really saw that. I think it just was like a way to make it sound fun, so we can still have you be quiet when we don't want to hear your complaints or concerns or your voice. And I think that was a really catastrophic choice by my parents growing up, to allow me to believe that my voice didn't matter, and especially in just those moments. So that's really what the book is about. That's what banana fish means. So
yeah. Wow, I did not know that. I thought that you made that up, and I'm so sorry about that. It's It's
Yeah.
it's amazing. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading your book, Zach. And thank you so much for your valuable time today and everything you mentioned. It's so good to hear these stuff. It's easy that we just don't notice them or don't even think about them. And this was a real like wake up call too. So thank you a lot.
Yeah, it's been lights out, you know.
Disco.
So there we go. There we go. On cue. On
Yeah.
cue.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate it. And for those young men and young women listening, I think this is a really amazing time to empower the women around you. And I love what Fearless Women are doing. And I know that, I don't know, 20 years from now, both my girls will be probably joining forces with Fearless Women
Yeah.
to, help the mission and helping other women out. So happy to be a part
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, I
Thank
would
you.
love to host them. Okay.
She'll do it now. She would do it now.
I'm pretty sure you would.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you so much, Zach, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
got it. Take care. Bye.
Okay.